Okay, hello. I believe we are live. I'm going to go ahead and try to find the stream on my channel so I can see if we're actually live. I had a little bit of trouble getting started this morning. Let's see here. Is this me? Are we live now? I do believe that we are. Hello, welcome to the Eurorack Patch Lab today. We're just going to have some fun. We're going to be a super casual hangout today. I'm going to explain how I put together my latest drum and bass live jam that I did, that I posted the video for yesterday. We're going to talk about Eurorack in general. I'm going to answer any questions that may come up in the chat. And then we're going to unpatch everything and do a little bit of patching in real time. I'm a little bit nervous. Just take a few breaths here and catch up. See if anybody's joining in on the stream. Hi, Sean. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining me. Can you guys hear me okay? Is my voice coming through okay? I'm a little bit new to this live streaming setup. What we're going to do here is I'm just going to mess around with the rig and play a little bit of the live jam while a few more people join the chat. Then we're going to talk about the components that are involved in this jam. If somebody can let me know if you can hear me okay, and if you can hear the music okay. Loud and clear. Fantastic. Studio, thanks for tuning in. We're basically just chilling today. It's going to be a super casual live stream. We're just going to kind of talk about Eurorack in general, and I'm going to explain all of the components that I used to put together this latest, live jam for the channel, which was my first jam with this particular setup. I had a bit of a time trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to construct the jam and where I wanted to, use the sounds and which modules I wanted to use. Specifically, I like things to change a lot and evolve and move and have some, pre-planned things that are going to happen when I'm doing a jam. I found it right off the jump a little bit difficult. I'm really new to all this Eurorack, and while I was able to sort of like get a basic groove, happening in real time, to actually jam with that groove and get some changes and some ebb and flow happening was a lot more challenging than I had originally anticipated. What I'm doing with this hybrid setup is I'm using the Digitact, which is, my love affair instrument in the studio. I'm using this as the brain of the system. A lot of people that I've talked to are really into, like, when working with Eurorack, to have everything being controlled by Eurorack and it all to be one kind of, cohesive, sort of production, but that's not really my bag. My bag is more of a hybrid type of thing, and I like to involve different instruments, especially samplers. Those of you who've been following my channel know that I'm a sample maker, so anything that I can load my own sounds or samples into is definitely a benefit to my workflow. So being able to, have the Digitact as the brain that's kind of controlling the Eurorack here still allows me to sort of have some samples available in the Digitact. I've also got some sampler modules here in the rack, which we'll talk about. And I've also got 8 MIDI channels, which allow me to send some pitch and CV information out to the case. I'm using the Polyend Poly 2 module, which allows me to connect the Digitact to the case and send the pitch and the gate information out, as well as the clock information. So I'm able to send clock to everything in the case from a signal in the Digitact. Hey, welcome, John. Thanks for joining me. We got Femi820 in the studio. All right, guys, cool deal. This is just going to be a really super casual hangout today. I couldn't actually get everything that I'm using in this jam in the shot, but we're going to do our best to cover all of the things that I'm using. I guess we'll start by talking about the drums, which are some amen breaks that I've chopped up, and I've got a few different variations of that break. What I've done is I'm using the Squarp Rample sample module here, and what this does is it allows me to load 4 slots of samples, so I can load 4 different samples, but in each of the slots I can actually load up to 12 different samples, and then by default it will play back those samples in random order. So what I've done here is I've taken the amen break, and I've created a few different variations of that break. I picked one as like my main variation, and I loaded that into the sample 1 slot a few times, maybe 5 or 6 times. And then I took a few different variations, maybe just 2 or 3, and I loaded those in 1 time each. So that randomly, each time it triggers the drum loop, it's going to, trigger potentially a different version of that drum loop, and I don't know which one it's going to trigger, and it sort of creates a lot of movement in the jam. Let's scroll through a few of these drum loops, see if we can hear the variation come through. Whoops, sorry about that. That's my main loop, and it's in a few times. And see, here we have it playing a different loop. And there's that one right there that has a little shuffle at the end. So the whole time the jam is playing, it's just going to cycle. Let me see if I can get just those to solo here. It's literally just going to randomly pick which of those loop variations that it's going to play, which kind of keeps the jam just sort of moving the whole time. Hey, Tony, welcome. Can you hear me okay? Sound levels are good. All right. Now, I've got the drum loop routed through a filter, so at any time during the jam, I've got real-time control over these drums. Whoops, I've got my shaker up here. I've got real-time control, and I can kind of filter these down. I've got a mixer here, which is the Hex Mix by Bafaco, which has 6 switches on it, which are 3-position switches. In the up position, the track is on, so I can turn any of these 6 tracks on and off in real time. In the middle position, it turns the track off. These are called, I'm not real technical with this yet, I'm still learning, but these are called Vactrol mutes, and what that means is if you listen real carefully, when I turn the track off, you'll hear that it kind of like fades out rather than just immediately stops. Let me play that for you again. So the loop is playing. Bring that filter back up, and I can turn that off. Now listen to how it sort of fades out when I turn it off. So it's not a real, choppy type of mute. That's just how the mutes work in this module. They're called Vactrol mutes. I'm finding these super keen. And in the bottom position, the switches will momentarily turn the track on, but not, as soon as you let go of the switch, it'll turn it off again. So if I press down and then let go, it just kind of momentarily brings that on. And I found this switch in combining with the filter to be really handy for creating some real-time kind of movement in the breaks, because I can filter it down, turn the drum loop on just a little bit, turn it on just a little more, and then turn the cutoff on the filter up. And now I'm pushing down on the knob, but all I have to do is just, on the switch rather, is just push it all the way up, and then my mute, is now on again. So that's the point with the drums. The whole point through the jam is that the drums are constantly moving and evolving and just playing those different versions of the A-mid break. I created for the intro of the track. Let me see if I can go to that pattern here. I created another variation of that loop. Let me see if I can get that to play. There it is. Just kind of a halftime, kind of filtered, messed with version so that I've got something. Um, I really wanted to be able to, in real time, like go to different like scenes, basically, for lack of a better word, or segments and transitions of the jam. And so I have a few samples in the Digitact, which is allowed, and we're going to go through all of the pieces. I have a few like of the sounds coming from the Digitact, so when I change patterns in the Digitact, it's changing those. It's mostly just the bass line that's coming out of the Digitact. And in fact, let's go ahead and discuss the bass line first. Um, out of the Digitact. What I didn't want to do is I didn't want to put a whole bunch of sounds in the Digitact because kind of the point is to be getting the sounds out of the modular system. But I still want the jam to be able to move and flow in real time. So I definitely needed to get some of these to come out here. And what we're going to do is just solo the bass so you can hear that. Now, I made the bass in Ableton. It's 4 one-shot sounds that are tuned to the key of F minor pentatonic, which is my favorite scale / key to write in. And I believe I have those here. Right. So what we can do is I will show you the 4 different one-shots for the bass. Can you hear that? Kind of a distorted 808 type of jungle bass. Another pitch. Another pitch. And another pitch. So I've got those 4 different one-shot samples that make up the bass line. I've got really only 4 patterns here that are playing different bass lines. The Digitact is sequencing the drums and also a chord, but we're going to get into that in just a sec. So if I just kind of have the groove change to a different pattern here, if I just sort of have the groove going here, I can, bring the drums in and out in real time over that bass line, I can filter those drums down in real time, turn them on and off, So here we have the drums that are constantly changing, and I'm able to filter them. So we've got a couple of little things that are starting to move and ebb and flow. The next thing that I did was I wanted to add some shakers to this mix to kind of get some top end, like high frequency movement in the mix. So I wanted to get creative with the shakers, and I took a couple of shakers from the 626, I took a couple of shakers from the 727, and I took a couple of shakers from the Roland 808, and I loaded them into sample slot 4 on the Squarp Rample sample player. Now remember what I've said before, that when you load samples into the Rample, by default it plays back those samples in random order. So randomly, when I am triggering the shaker sample, it's going to be playing different shaker samples each time and scrolling randomly through those different sounds. See if I can bring this up in the mix for us here. There we go. So if you listen real close, you'll hear that it's playing different sounds. And what we're going to do, so I'm going to solo the shaker here, and we can hear, if you listen really closely, that it's actually playing those different shaker sounds. I've got the shaker running through, hey, what's happening, Gaz? I've got the shaker running through an envelope so that the release on that is a little bit tighter. If I bring the decay up on that a little bit, you can hear a little bit more of the length of those shaker samples. But for drum and bass, and you can hear how they're changing through the, randomly cycling through the different samples. But for drum and bass, I kind of wanted to keep that top end a little bit tighter, more like a hi-hat, just really crisp and clean there. And then, we can bring the drums in over that at any time. I've got real-time control over the volume of the shaker, so I can kind of bring that in and out at any time. And let's see here. We've discussed the drums, the bass, this shaker, and what else have we got? We've got this really awesome sort of evolving and moving pad sound that I'm creating with the Platts oscillator from Mutable Instruments. And let's check that out real fast. That's coming through here. And so I'm running an expander for the Bifaco Hex mix. So I've got an expander on my mixer that allows me, because the mixer itself only has 6 inputs, which for my style is just really not quite enough inputs. So I got an expander that allows me to plug 1, 2, 3, 4 stereo channels additionally into this mixer, and I've got a volume knob for each of those channels. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with the cool, mute switches, but you can still adjust those, tracks via volume knob here. And so we'll bring up that shaker just a tiny bit in the background. I've got this kind of moving pad here. It's running through, it's running through the Javelin envelope generator from WMD Devices, so that it's not like just a static sound, but that we're getting that sort of gated effect on it. I'm sending a clock signal over to the other rack and doing some modulation with that over here. So we're very slowly moving the timbre of this chord sound, and we're very slowly moving the harmonics of this chord sound using some really gentle LFO. I really like the slow and subtle movement that you can create with like CV and LFOs and modular. I've got this sound running through a reverb. It's the Desmodus Versio from Noise Engineering. We can get crazy on that and you can really hear it. You can do some neat stuff with this reverb in real time if you want to get, that kind of creative with it. Or you can just kind of use it as a, real straightforward casual reverb, and that's kind of why I'm using it here, just to add a little bit more, presence to this sort of chord sound. And I can fade that out in real time. Let's talk about some hi-hats. I've got a hi-hat track here that I can bring in and out in real time using just, an on and off switch on the mixer. And how I'm creating this guy is I'm just sending, I'm sending a clock signal to a Euclidean sequencer, and the Euclidean sequencer is triggering the hi-hat sound. Then I'm taking a couple of really slow LFOs again, and we're messing with the sizzle of this sound, and we're messing with the decay of this sound, so that it has just a little bit of life and sort of movement. You'll notice that I'm going to say those words probably quite a lot, life and movement in the sound. That's really one of the things that I'm just absolutely in love with modular, is being able to do those subtle morphs and movements and help the tracks really start feeling alive. A little bit, takes a lot of work in Ableton to get that kind of result. You got to like automate that stuff for the most part. I'm sorry, I said that all backwards. What we were listening to there was actually a little bit of a melodic arpeggio, which we'll get to. I'm sorry about that. This is the hi-hats, but it's basically just, a really thin little, top-end sound. It goes really well with the shakers to kind of create. And again, remember, those shakers are scrolling through different samples. So as the hi-hat is slowly evolving and the shakers are kind of scrolling through different samples, we sort of get, I don't know if you can hear that, we sort of get that thick and interesting, hi-hat shaker type of groove. A lot more than just, say, a hi-hat going, and not moving. Hey, what's happening, Wall? Thanks for joining me. Can you guys still hear me okay? Is everything coming through? Let's see here. Got the shakers up still. So I'm sorry about that. This is what I originally thought was the hi-hat. But what this actually is I'm running a sequence, a little 8-note sequence. And let's see if I can. We'll get to that when we start patching, I suppose. But I've got two, I guess that's just a little simple gated sequence there. Let's see here. I've done a video on the Pioneer RMX 1000 and how I'm using it. But basically what I am doing for this track, for this jam per se, is I'm just using it as like a transition tool to help get a little bit of those risers in there, and also to do like some stuttering and rolls. The RMX 1000 allows you to just scroll the rollover. If you really focus on the timing, you can do it. I'm a little sketchy with it yet, so I didn't actually use that yet. Use it to add elements to the mix or take them away. In fact, that's kind of cool. And then bring the noise up. 1, 2, 3, turn it off. And then you're kind of back again. So I'm basically just using the RMX 1000 to just further help with those transitions, and something that I can do in real time, you know, being as though it is, you know, a live jam and whatnot. Speaking of which, I just want to go over again, like how I'm using the Digitac to really control this stuff. I have 4 different patterns, and basically we've got the bassline on track 1 here, and on track 8, I've got a crash cymbal or an impact sound. On track 7, we'll have a different, you know, impact or a crash sound. And then on track 6, I'll have a riser sound. And that's basically the same kind of thing as just bringing up a noise here on the RMX 1000. And basically, I'm just using these for transition effects and to help the ebb and flow of the jam. If you want to know a little bit more about how I'm using the Pioneer RMX 1000, I do have a video on that. I also like to do, you guys know I like to do vocal samples in the live jams, and this one is no different. I've been watching a lot of videos on the modules from WMD Devices. I've got quite a few of their modules in my system right now, and I'm really vibing their modules. The dude who runs WMD, Alex, was doing a video the other day, and this is the vocal sample that I used was a vocal sample of Alex from WMD Devices.
You know me, I just love to jam.
Put a little bit of delay on that.
I just love to jam.
Chop that in 2 so that I can kind of use them to play off of each other and trigger those in real time during the jam. There's also a section here where I'm bringing in a second chord stab, and what I did was I sampled like an F minor 9 out of my quasi-MIDI Sirius, and did a few different variations of that, like first position, second position, one with a filter cutoff down, etc. So I've got maybe 4 or 5 different versions of that chord stab. Let me see if I can play that for you. Whoops. That's the wrong one. Is it on this one? Yeah, there it is. I've got it running through a really big 15-second reverb out of the Strymon Big Sky. And each time this chord plays, it's going to play through a different variation of itself, you know, just like the drums. Very subtle. One of the things that I had a hard time with in mixing this was to get the levels right. I have kind of a problem of pushing the level too hard in the very beginning. Like, we're talking gain staging here. Like, when I'm starting a track, like say I'm starting with the drums, I'm turning the volumes up, and like oftentimes I'm starting that first track out at such a high volume that in going through and adding the other elements to the track, it becomes really difficult to get the volumes of those to match that high level volume that you've got set up in the beginning. And it's one of the things that I personally really have to work on is not setting like those first few tracks in the system quite as loud so that you get more headroom as you're working and adding more tracks so that you don't have to turn those new tracks up quite as loud to match that super extreme level. And that was a problem that I ran into with these chord stabs. I've got the mix and the drums and the bass so loud that when I went to add those chord stabs, it was so quiet, and I kept having to turn the volume up and turn the volume up in different, areas, and I'm getting a little bit of a distortion on that. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's just not quite as clean as I would like it to be. And that's sort of a personal thing that I need to work on is that gain staging in the beginning of setting these up. Definitely something to keep in mind. Yeah, WMD, those guys are making some amazing devices right now. I believe this is probably a mono stream, Martin. I think that that's just a limitation of the YouTube app, that this live streams are in mono. Um, if anybody has any questions at all about anything related to music production, not just Eurorack, iPad music production or music production in general, please feel free to ask and I'll do my best to answer. We're just sort of hanging out. I'm trying to keep these Eurorack patch labs really casual and super fun. Yeah, everything too loud, right? It's a thing. It's a definite thing. That's why I wanted to bring that up because I definitely think in the beginning, I really had this problem a lot. I need to keep those very first tracks not quite so loud. I mean, if I'm getting those first tracks at 100% of their maximum volume, it's really going to be difficult to match the rest of it. And that's definitely something I need to focus on. Let's see here. I think we've pretty much covered all of the things in this jam. Let me just show you guys that last little groove here. I like what I've done here because I took the drum loop and now we're playing it as a 4 on the floor, but if you listen carefully, you'll hear that we're scrolling through different sounds. So it's constantly evolving as it scrolls through these breaks. I'm just triggering it on every quarter note instead of letting it play out. But because the samples are cycling through in the rample, it creates that really neat kind of groove. I love it when it hits the lower kick drum. Wait for it. See what I mean? And the reason that you might hear like so many of the regular and then the low one after a while is again when I'm using these sample players that allow me to load in multiple samples and they'll play back those randomly. Let's say I want to use 4 different drum loops, right? If I load just 4 different drum loops in and start playing those back, it's going to have a 25% chance basically on which of those drum loops it's going to play. But if I choose one of those drum loops as the main drum loop and I put that in, say, 5 times, now the percentages on which drum loop are going to play are a lot heavier towards the one that I've chosen as my main drum loop. So even though we're still getting the changes happening completely randomly, more often than not, it's going to pick my main drum loop that I've chosen because I'll put that in more times than the others. And I use that technique when I'm doing, anything in these multiple triggering samplers. Load more than one of a certain sample if you want that to trigger more often. I really, really love the Squarp Ramble for that. Amazing sample player. I'm also really into the Tip Top Audio 1 samplers. They don't allow you to play back the samples exactly the same way, but they're really easy and fun to work with. Let's see here. Yeah, loud. It does center the F stuff. That's this. That's just it. That's just it. Um, Out of the shot here, I've got a Novation SL MK3, which is a MIDI controller, but also an 8-track sequencer. And I'm using that to trigger the Dreadbox Typhon synthesizer to play a melodic groove over the top of this. I can literally just kind of hit a button, and on the next downbeat of a measure, it'll start playing that groove. And I can just literally bring that in at any time during the mix. I'm just going to step over here and turn that on. 2, 2, 3, and so just basically another element that I can kind of bring in and out in real time. And then I can just turn that off by hitting another button on that side. So we've got the vocal samples that I can do in real time. I can turn another synthesizer sequence on and off in real time as I'm changing the patterns, the 4 different patterns in the digitact. The bass line is changing because the bass is coming from here. We've got those risers, those crash cymbals that are sort of helping the ebb and flow. I've got it set up to where every 16 bars there'll be a crash cymbal, and at the end of 16 bars there'll be a little bit of a riser to help push you into the next section of 16 bars and help that ebb and flow in real time as the mix is kind of progressing forward on its own. I'm pretty sure that's about all of the elements that we've got going in this mix. I think I'm hemming and hawing a little because I'm a little nervous about pulling all the cables. These take quite a bit of time to put together. I spent a couple of weeks actually putting this one together. But I think it is about that time, and we're going to go ahead and pull these cables and then maybe patch something casually in real time right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn off the Akai MPC Live here and get this out of the way so that I can go ahead and toss all the cables over here as I'm pulling them out without creating too much of a mess. So hopefully we'll still be able to work with this pile of cables in just a moment here. Just create a little bit more space by moving some things around. Hopefully I can reach over here to set this down. Cool. Okay. If anybody's got any questions of any kind, now would be about to ask Typhon. Yeah, the Typhon is amazing. Let me go ahead and, for the price, this is literally the most amazing mono synth, you guys. It has the ability to store presets, which is amazing. It came with the ability to store 2 banks worth of presets, but they've already updated it, and you can store 4 different banks of presets. It has built-in effects, and they're amazing high quality. They're like 96 kilohertz effects, and the sound out of this is just, whoo, absolutely amazing. Really, really amazing synth for the price. Okay, just gonna make sure again that all the volumes here are completely down, and we're gonna go for it. We're gonna just start pulling these cables. And normally I would take the time. I have a rack over here to, put everything in a certain place and keep everything super neat. But what we're gonna do is we're not really gonna worry about that because we're gonna try to patch something up when I'm done here. So I'm just going to kind of messily toss all these cables over. And just bear with me. I don't want to go too fast and cause any damage to the cables or to the modules, but I also know that this is probably a tedious part of these videos, so yeah, gas strikes. Gas is really strong these days. This is an amazing time, you guys, to be involved in electronic music. I've been doing this since the late 80s, since a time where there really wasn't sounds. I mean, I started in, I think it was 1987 with the Roland S50 and Roland TR-505 drum machine sequencing that Roland S50. And you could sample into the Roland S50. It's one of their first like consumer available samplers. It was an 8-bit mono sampler. So anything that you're sampling into it, you're sampling at 8-bit mono. So the songs that you would create back in 1987 with the Roland S50 were pretty lo-fi, if you get my drift. And even just to get like a synthesizer back then was like a few $1,000s, like at least. And they weren't quite as easy to afford on the pocketbook as just a couple of $100, like we have so many options for these days. With the Cyrus Rex. I'm not familiar with the Cyrus Rex? No, is that a module? Tell me about it. If it's a module, I'd love to know about it. I'm learning as much as I can, as quickly as I can, but obviously there's a limit to, how much information one can actually retain and process when trying to learn all of this stuff. I've been really enjoying the journey so far, and trying to learn as much as I can about how to control all this stuff. Modular EBM. Oh, I will definitely have to check that out after the stream. Thank you for the tip. I'd like to say also, for those of you who like are interested in modular, but maybe haven't poked your head quite deep in that rabbit hole, but maybe you're more interested about, just sticking your head in the hole and looking around and seeing what's available and what kind of, stuff is around. I would say definitely take a look at the website modulargrid.net. They have literally every module referenced in there, and they'll let you put together a little virtual rack and move the modules around so you can kind of like design the components you'd like to work with before actually spending any money. What we're going to do today, I'm going to attempt to patch up a little something. We're going to use the Squarp Rample to get started with. I've gone ahead and yesterday I put together a little folder of some new samples. It's amazing how much like storage you can get as a little mini SD card in the Rample, and they filed the kits inside of it with letters A to Z, and each letter can have 100 kits of these 4 sounds. So you've got A1 through A99, or B1 through B99. You can really get a lot of kits created and stored on this card, and it comes with a lot of kits to play with as well. Being a sample maker, I'm kind of more into loading my own sounds into it. But there's some cool stuff on the card that it came with. And what we're going to do is I've got like a kick drum with 2 different variations that we're going to start with, trying to patch something with. And we're not going to do jungle. We're not going to do drum in the bass. We're not going to do that. And we're not going to do 4 on the floor because that's expected. So we're probably not going to do 4 on the floor today. But maybe just some sort of interesting bass groove or something. And we'll just sort of see how that goes. Being as though I'm super new to all this, we may get lucky, we might not get lucky. So cross your fingers for me getting lucky. Okay, we're just about all unpatched here. Now, I know it's probably hard to see some of the details and whatnot. And that's why I mean for these Eurorack Patch Lab sessions to be super casual and just, super fun, a way for us to kind of discuss the units and just kind of get in the door of the modular world without getting like super deep into the nitty gritty. But there are going to be videos on that. I'm going to do videos where I'm talking in detail about the modules that I chose, why I chose them, how I'm using them, all that kind of stuff. Let's see here. Can we? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to move the camera just a little bit for the patching. Let's see if I can move this without screwing up the audio for you guys. We'll see if we can kind of get a little bit more of a better view here on the actual rack itself. Is that any better? Can we see that okay? Just to explain for those who might not be aware, what we're looking at here on the screen is Ableton, and I'm running just the FabFilter Pro Q3, which is an EQ. We're not using it as an EQ, we're using it as a visualizer to see the signal that I'm sending through the system. So currently we're hearing and seeing my voice being represented here. Over here on the right, I've got the isotope tonal balance control, and I just kind of keep these up on the screen when I'm producing and mixing on this stuff. I've got an output from my mixer routed into Ableton, so all of the audio is going through here, and I can kind of see visual representation of our frequencies and whatnot. This is going to make it a little bit harder for me to reach everything. Let's see if I can just tiny. Okay, maybe that's better. And let's see here. So what we're going to do is bring up the. We're going to go ahead and. Okay, we're going to go ahead and immediately start patching out this kick drum because I want to take the kick drum from the. Let's get a. I put all the cables right underneath the camera. Let me just grab a wad of cables and put these over here. This isn't how I work, but it's definitely how we're going to do it today so that I don't take an extra amount of time just sorting cables and whatnot. Any other suggestions? And for the iPod, I would definitely say check out my rack for iPad. I'm hoping to do some more videos on my rack for iPad. They keep updating it. There's been a lot of new modules, and we now have like MIDI control in and out from MyPad. It'll sync to tempo in ALM, which means in all theory, we should be able to get it synced up to a real world modular system. And I'm definitely going to be exploring that in the future. So we're going to take an output from the Squarp Rample, and we're going to run that into an input over here on the amplinator. Now, the reason that I'm going into the amplinator module instead of just running directly into my mixer is that this module allows me to turn the volume up to 20. So, like, I know a lot of you like to go to 11 and get loud, but this one actually goes to 20. It will double the volume, so I can get that level really loud. I know I just said to watch the level at the beginning, so we're definitely going to do that also. Let's see here, listen. Okay, right. So we need to just take a out here and run that into a channel on the mixer. I'm going to turn these on. Okay. Fantastic. So now we're going to, let's go ahead and get a new project happening in the Digitact. And we're going to use the Digitact to set our tempo. And let's start with 120 today because that's the default tempo here. And we're going to use the first MIDI track on the Digitact to sequence this bass drum coming out of the Rample. Again, there's two different variations of that. So it's going to play a little bit of a variation by default. All we have to do is, let's see here, function. Cool. And channel 1. What am I doing wrong there? MIDI. I should be. Why am I not? Okay, maybe well, I'm having difficulty on the very first step today. That's not super great. I got the MIDI in. Oh, okay. Got the MIDI in. Okay, well, let's reapproach that so that we don't take too much time out of the stream for this. Let me get some of these shorter cables. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and take a clock signal. I've got it set to the Digitact is sending a clock signal to the poly 2 module. And if I take the clock signal and route it into a multiple module, now I can take the clock signal out and route that to several different devices. And so we're going to need a clock signal, and we're also going to need a. Let me just grab some of these shorter cables. Pardon my head in the camera here. We're also going to need a way to assign a start and stop signal so that the rack knows like what the downbeat of the measures are. So we're going to go ahead and I've got it set up already to send a clock signal out of a specific output here, and I'm using that output to route the clock signal, and I've got a start and stop signal coming out of a specific output, and we're going to route that into the multiple as well so that I can route these signals all throughout the case. Yeah, live modular big risk. Absolutely. Okay. What we'll do now is we're going to take the clock signal and we're going to run that into a sequencer. Let's run that into let's go ahead and run this into the Mastertron Golden Shower. Actually, we're going to need a little bit longer cable, and we're going to take an output of the clock here, and we're going to run this over here into the clock input of the sequencer called the Mastertron Golden Shower. Let me go ahead and route that a little differently. And now when I press play on the, no, we're still not, what am I doing wrong here? Oh, because I don't have a, no, it's definitely not, for Pete's sake. This is the clock though, and it's coming. I don't know. Of course, we're gonna have difficulty for my live stream. Sorry, guys. I'm really not sure what I'm doing wrong at this point. I should be getting MIDI out, but I'm not, and I should be getting clock over there, but I'm not. So now I'm just getting a little bit confused as to what I'm doing wrong. I would love to do one of these patch labs and not have a hiccup along the way. That would be great, because I can hear the sound. It's definitely coming through. I see what the deal is. This is a new session. That's what the deal is. And I didn't go into the MIDI settings, did I? So let me go ahead and do that. Doing these in real time is interesting. It certainly provides a challenge. So we're going to go ahead and there we go. And that's probably going to fix that. And if I go back into the MIDI configuration and the channels, is that? Yeah, we got our clock going now. Okay, fantastic. So I just, when you start a new session on the Digitact, you have to go in and set the MIDI settings accordingly. So now that I've done that, it's officially sending clock through the poly-in poly2 module out to our multiple, and the multiple is sending that clock signal over here to our sequencer, and the sequencer is now moving in time with our clock. If I were to turn the, the tempo up on the Digitact, to like really fast, now our, you can visually see that our playhead on that sequencer is running a lot faster. So we've got control over the tempo there. What we're going to do now is just send the that start and stuff. I'm losing cables. We're going to send the start and stop signal over to this Mastertron Golden Shower so that it knows what the downbeat is. When I press start, it will know that that's the downbeat of the measure. Right, actually, we're going to use this one for that. Hold me. One, and then, so I just need to send that MIDI signal, but the MIDI was being weird. That's weird. So we're going to go 8. Bear with me for just 1 second here. Doing this in real time is quite a challenge. Did I do that right? Yeah, I did. Okay, great. So now when I press play on the sequencer, our playhead starts at the 1. Probably can't see that real good with the low resolution live stream, but like if we're down here and I press play, it starts at the 1 again. So we've got a sequencer that's now timed to the Digitact. And what we need to do is just go ahead and take an output from this into the gate input on that kick drum. And now if I put a pattern into the Mastertron Golden Shower, we're going to go ahead and get some kick rhythms happening here. Well, that's kind of cool. And what I want you to listen for here is that it's triggering 2 different kick drum samples. One of them is a little bit more distorted than the other. So by using this kind of a method, by default, we get some of that variation happening. You guys know that as a sample maker, this is like, I mean, top of the world for me. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. Just to be able to put a couple of samples in and then randomly get that variation happening. Oh, that's cool. Let's go ahead and we're going to now patch that clock signal into a Euclidean sequencer. And we're going to need to tell that sequencer when the downbeat is as well. So we need a reset command. So we'll take the reset command into that as well. And now if I reset the clock, it'll reset this Euclidean sequencer so it knows when the downbeat is. And we can choose what to sequence with that. Let me turn the volume down so we're not just blasting you guys out with kick drums. And let's take an output from this sequencer, and we're going to take that into the input of a hi-hat module over here so that we can trigger like a hi-hat sequence over this kick drum. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and need an output from the hi-hat module into the mixer so that we can hear it. But maybe what we'll do, no, let's just keep it nice and dry for now. We're going to go ahead and patch that in here. That's already sounding kind of neat. Cool little rhythm. Big shout out to Euclid. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really loving these sequencers. These are the Euclid from 2HP, and what that means is they measure the rack space in what they call HP. I want to say that's horizontal pitch. That's probably wrong, so don't quote me on that. But the amount of rack spaces that each module will take up is measured in HP. So something like this module on the end is taking up this 4 HP, and that's really not that much room, but you get something like the poly into poly 2, and that's taking up quite a bit more HP in your system. Whereas I've got a mixer here, it's like, this wide, it's like, 30, 40 HP or something. But these little sequencers from 2 HP, all of their modules are just what the name says, they're only 2 HP, meaning you can squeeze a lot of them, in. I've got the 2 HP ADSR, the 2 HP VCA, which is the little envelope system that I've worked up here. I've got 2 different Euclid sequencers, so I can sequence, like maybe a snare drum and a percussion, or hi-hat and a percussion or something. And I've got an LFO from them, a really small LFO, and then their snare module and their hi-hat module, which are, giving us some sound. Let's go ahead and program some variation into this hi-hat so that it starts moving a little bit. We're going to take an LFO from the DivKid Oct module, and we're going to run that. I'm not going to be super careful about the cables today because we're trying to do this kind of quickly. We're going to run that into the IntelliGel Quadrat, which is an attenuator, which is going to allow me to adjust the amount of modulation that we're going to send to this hi-hat. So we're doing that here. We need a longer cable to get back over to the hat. I'm just going to take this crazy cable and just start, well, maybe not this one. A little shorter. It's still pretty long. Bear with me and my, bizarre cables today. I'm just trying to go a little bit quickly. What we're going to do is we're going to do some modulating on this hat so that it starts moving, right? You can hear that if I turn this knob, we get more of an open hat sound. And if I close it down, we get more of a closed hi-hat sound. But what we're going to do is automate some movement. We're going to automate an LFO to start moving that so I don't have to use my fingers to move the knob. What I'm using is I'm using an attenuator to lessen the width of that LFO. You can hear we're getting some movement there. We're going to go ahead and go with that. And let's go ahead and add a clap onto the top of this, shall we? Let's go ahead and let's patch into the clock signal into my second Euclid, and let's patch the start and stop signal into that second Euclid so that it knows when the downbeat of the measure is. We're going to go ahead and reset our clock here by pressing start and stop so that our downbeats are in sync. And we're going to take an out from that second Euclid into the input, the gate input of a module that I've loaded some clap samples into. And then we're going to take an output from that module, and we're going to patch that into the mixer here. We're going to go ahead and probably just go with that. It sounds all right. Let's go ahead and automate this pitch to move around just a little bit. That's kind of fun. What we'll do is we're going to take turn the volume down just a little bit so I don't have to yell quite so loud here. Grab some of these extra cables from over here. Sorry about the reach, guys. Can you guys still hear me okay? As these are going and as I start loading new sounds and whatnot, I don't want to get, too loud for you guys at home there. We're going to take another LFO and we're going to run that into this quadrat as well, which again, I'm just using as an attenuator so that here's an LFO, right? It's a full width LFO. It goes all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom. When I use an attenuator, I can make that LFO a lot smaller so that the range of movement on the LFO is maybe a little more subtle, like this. And that's how we're using these attenuators here to adjust the width of that LFO range to give us custom movement. So if I turn the range up all the way, you'll hear on the clap that the pitch on the clap is really moving a lot. It goes from very low to very high. But by attenuating the LFO, we can control the amount of movement. You hear how it's not near as extreme now, but it's still moving? So this is cool. Now we've got a beat happening. There's already a little bit of variation in the kick drum because there's 2 samples in the kick drum. Cool. We've got the Mazatron Golden Shower sequencer sequencing the kick drum. And we've got 2 Euclidean sequencers sequencing the hi-hats and the clap here. Again, I would be able to use the Digitact to trigger any of these things as well in a perfect world. But we were having a little bit of trouble getting that set up in real time, so we're going to just sort of pass on that for this session. What let's do, though, is let's see if we can get some sort of a melodic element, which may or may not be easy or doable at this time. Let's give it a go. Let's see if we can do that. What I've got is another multiple on the second case. What a multiple is it allows you to plug a signal in and then it duplicates that signal. These particular multiples have a lot of inputs and outputs, and they will allow you to plug in a signal and duplicate that exact signal up to 14 times. So if you have a large system and you need to send your clock signal out to a lot of modules, these are absolutely amazing. You can route different things into them as well, so you don't need to just have one thing and 14 outputs. You can split them up. But this is how I'm getting signals between the cases. Is I'm going to go ahead and take an output of the clock signal from the module that's a multiple of the clock here, so I can, it's just sending out duplicates of that clock signal. And I'm now going to plug that into the multiple on the second case. So now anything I take out of these CV outputs is the clock signal, so that I can send that to any of the devices in the second case. And let's see here, we're going to send the clock signal over to this sequencer. This is an 8-step sequencer, and if I run this into the clock in, you'll see that immediately we have sort of a playhead now, which is, following our tempo. And if I route, we're going to need that same start and stop signal so that this sequencer knows when the downbeat is, the same way that the Euclidean sequencers and that the Mazatron sequencer know when the downbeat is. So I'm going to take an output from the start and stop over here, and I'm going to route that into this multiple over here. So now I've got the clock signal coming into this case, and I've got the start and stop signal coming into this case, and I can route those to any, got the mic on the camera stand there. So now I can go ahead and say, take the take the reset signal, and I can patch that into the reset of the sequencer. I can start and stop our main clock here. And now all of the sequencers are running in time, and they all know when the downbeat is. And that is super, super important. Hey, Smazat, thanks for joining me. Hey, we got 19 people here. All right, thank you very much for joining me, everyone. Let's go ahead and see if we can create a melodic sequence using this sequencer. What we're going to do is it actually has the ability to create 3 different melodic sequences. We're going to go ahead and take the CV, which is the pitch information, out of the first sequence, and we're going to run that. I'm going to need a slightly longer cable, and I'm just going to reach in front of the camera again and grab some of these longer cables. That was something else to keep in mind, friends, is that, the modules themselves are, let's face it, really, really pricey, okay? And I did quite a bit of investing and working with credit, and this is sort of a lifetime investment for me. But then when I started getting the modules here, I immediately realized just how many cables I was actually going to need. And oh my goodness, the cables themselves are yet another and, pretty large investment. Oh goodness. Okay, so let me go ahead and we're going to run the pitch information out from this sequencer into a quantizer. Now, what a quantizer is it's going to take these random voltages, which are basically control voltage signals, and it's going to turn those basically into note information that will quantize those notes to a specific scale that I choose. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set this to a minor pentatonic scale with a root note of F. This is the Tenderfoot Electronics Quad Quantizer module. I am really, really excited about this because it has 4 separate processors. So I don't know if you call them that, but I can plug in 4 different signals and quantize rather all of those signals to this same key so that we can really create some interesting and robust melodic elements. I'm just getting into using this, and we're going to hopefully make that happen today. What we're going to do is we're going to need let's see, we'll need to run this into a module to get some sound. We're going to use the Platts module from Mutable Instruments today, and we're going to see if we can get something happening out of that. Okay, so I'm going to need to run a trigger. Okay, cool. Let's run maybe a little longer one. Okay, we're going to take a clock out, and we're going to run that into another sequencer, which is another Mazatron Golden Shower. This is really my favorite sequencer right now because you can turn it on and off in real time and adjust your sequence in real time. This is absolutely magic for someone like me who likes the live jams using this in this way. I've got a video on this guy. It's actually the first module that I did a video on because I'm really, really about this module. It's a really great sequencer. And what we can do is we can take an output from this sequencer, and we can run that into the trigger input of this quantizer. So it's now controlling how many of the steps are coming through. So if I have maybe just like a few steps in these 8, you can see here, hopefully, that this light is lighting up. That's in correlation to the steps we choose. So if I choose the sequencer to play a note on all 8 steps, our light here is lighting up on all 8 steps. What we're going to do is we're going to need to take a pitch output from the quantizer, and we're going to run that into the Platts module. We're going to run that into the volt per octave input, so we're getting pitch information into this module. And now we'll take a nice long cable and throw some more on the ground here and bump the camera. And we're going to take an output from the Platts module. We're going to run that over to my mixer. Turn that down just a little bit just in case. Maybe I'll run that on the input 6 to make a little bit more specification. Okay. Now you can hear that we've got this really high-pitched kind of melodic sequence happening, right? Well, we have a couple of ways that we can approach how this is working. We can turn this CV knob down, which is controlling how much the width of the pitch, I'm not sure exactly how to say that, is coming out of the sequencer. So if I turn the knob all the way to the right, we're going to get those high notes, and we're going to get those low notes, full range of notes. But if I turn the knob down, now we're just getting one note. We're limiting the range of notes that can come out of the sequencer. can maybe tune this to our key. We're working in the key of F today. We're going to take an auxiliary output, and we're going to run that into the data, and we're going to try to tune that to an F, or actually just the first step, rather. Or, let me hold this for a sec. Okay. I can actually stop on a step and then control the note that's happening on each step. We can set what that note's going to be by adjusting the knob. And I've got an output of the module here, a separate auxiliary output running into this tuner, so I can actually see what the note is. This note is currently an E. Let's see if I can change the scale here. I think I'm in the, there we go. Now I'm in the F minor scale. And what I'm going to do is just try to tune this a little bit to get an F. And there we have it. Now I'm going to move to the next step. And it shows me, whoops, I'm going to move to the next step. And I'm going to hold that step down. And I can adjust the pitch on that step. Let's see here. And then I can tell the sequencer to start going again. That's kind of cool. We can kind of get a bass sort of thing happening. That sounds kind of in tune. Maybe we want to run this through an envelope so that we can adjust how it's playing a little bit. So we can take the output out of there and run it into an envelope instead. We can then take the output from that envelope. And then all we need to do, let's see here, I'm going to swap out this cable here. All we need to do is we need to trigger this envelope and tell it, you know, when it's actually going to trigger the envelope. I'm going to use the same sequencer that we're triggering the quad quantizer with, and I'm going to use that exact same signal. There we go. So now we're running this bass sound through an envelope. And if I mute the other tracks, you can hear what I mean. So you can hear how instead of playing the full note, I actually have control over it now. And that's pretty cool. The envelope is being triggered at this from this Massitron Golden Shower. Let me move this stuff out of the way here, guys. So if I change the rhythm on the Massitron, it's going to change the rhythm that we're playing. Cool. Now, let's try to add another sound. I've got some chord stabs in the rample, and they're tuned to the key of F minor. I believe those are, I'm not sure which one they're coming out of. Let's find them. We're going to plug an output here into the mixer so we can hear what I'm triggering. And let's just find out where these chords are by listening. They're right there. And that's it. I'm going to need a little bit more level on that. So we're going to run the output of these chord stabs that I'm trying to get to the mixer into the amplinator. And remember from before what I told you guys, the amplinator goes to 20. So it will allow me to turn the volume up a little bit louder than it would if I could get it just directly into the mixer alone. I'll take an output from there and we'll run that into the mixer. It's going to allow me to get the chord samples louder in the mix. Okay, so what we would need is we would need a way to trigger those chord samples. I'm already using all 4 of my sequencers, so I would typically be using the poly in, poly 2 at this point to trigger that, and I'm not sure we're fully connected up to date, but let's go ahead and give that a go and see if we can make that happen. I'm going to go ahead and we'll patch that into the first one, and yeah, it's not sending that out. I don't know what I've done wrong with the poly in, poly 2 setup today, but I think when I reset the program on the Digitac that it kind of screwed up the settings that I had. So that doesn't leave me an extra sequencer, does it? For the chords at this point. Man, I really wish No, it is working! Oh, fantastic. Come on, shut the front door. Cool. Now we've got the chords being triggered back. And it seems like my connection from the Digitac to the Rample is working. So let's try and push that to the next level if we can. We've got 21 people watching. Thank you for sticking around, everybody. Yeah, spaghetti rainbow, all right. Let's go ahead and take another. The poly in, poly 2 allows me to send 8 different pairs of pitch and CV information out to the rack. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take an output of the pitch of the gate, not the pitch, excuse me, of the second one. And now I should be able to, if I just turn this MIDI channel, if I just turn this MIDI channel to channel 2, I should be controlling that sound, and turn everything else down real quick, and what I'm trying to do is get the third sound right. So we'll need an output from that. What I've got is I've got like a butane can that I hit a bunch of times with a little stick, like a little can, and I sampled the results from that. We'll take an output here into, let's run it into the amplinator. And then so maybe we can get a neat little rhythm happening on top of this. We're going to go ahead and plug that into 5 here, and yeah, cool. So what we've got is on 5, if I change the panning, we'll be able to hear that. Now, what's happening, if you notice, we're hearing different sounds when I hit the same button. And again, this is the Squarp Rample doing what it does best. You load samples into the slot, and it plays back those samples randomly. So now it's scrolling back between just some little samples of me hitting a little butane can, you know? But it's changing a little bit and moving around. I'm going to remove some of the lows from that sound. Start trying to get that in the mix. Let's go ahead and play that in real time. Live recording, quantized, cool, and there we have it, coming through in real time now, a little bit of rhythm from that can, right? And we can kind of turn other things on and off. There's that chord sample. Now here's the can rhythm happening with those hi-hats. So kind of a little bit of rhythm happening there. We add in that clap. Maybe turn the clap down a little. Add that bass line in. Pretty simple little bass groove over here. options are pretty much limitless as what we could do. We could start, rerouting things so that we're routing different things through a filter that we have access to. We could start, sending signals out of the case to external effects units or external filters if we wanted to. We could keep adding more elements. Using the Digitact as a sequencer this way, I have 8 MIDI tracks. So any of the modules, like for instance, braids, I can trigger. I could make a little percussion sound and trigger that, or we could do a different melodic sort of, arpeggio line or something using a different output on the sequencer. I haven't really experimented with that yet, so we're not going to do that in real time. But basically, let's not forget that the bassline is being triggered by this Massitron Golden Shower sequencer. So at any time, all I have to do is just change the number of steps that are playing here, and we will change the bassline and its rhythm. They're all kind of gonna groove. I love this Massitron Golden Shower sequencer, you guys. I know the name is silly and haha and all that, but it's really an amazing sequencer. If you're playing with your rack and you're doing some live stuff, remember this Massitron Golden Shower on the left is controlling our kick drum. So at any time, we can control this and we can create different patterns. Now we could create different patterns that are controlling stuff like the clap as well. Maybe bring that bass line back up. Maybe take the kick drum and instead of having like an off. Alright, we're controlling it from now we've just got kind of a little 4 on the floor kind of thing happening, right? We could change the tempo, maybe crank this up, start making some techno. Everything's going to follow along with that tempo because it's all following the main clock signal, which we're patching out to all of the devices from the one place. So you can see just how quickly you can go from one kind of a groove to a different kind of groove, especially when you're using these Massitron Golden Shower sequencers in real time. And this bass line is kind of boring, kind of static, not really moving around very much. We could go ahead and take the output from we could take the output from the envelope and instead take an output from a filter, then run the output from that envelope into the input of this filter, saturation FM input. And now I've got a filter on that bassline sound. So let me turn this back up a little bit. So for you can do some shaping of the sound and whatnot. It's got a really extreme 4-pole setting as well. This gives you a really, really dirty, kind of distorted sound. And I can make that even more dirty with some extra saturation. And then we've got a really distorted bass sound happening. Turn some of that distortion on. that's basically what I'm doing. That's basically how I'm using the rack. I'm, able to send any of the clock or start and stop signals over to the second case to get that involved. I've also got a couple of mixers in this case so that I can send some signals out of that case. Anything that I sort of want to like match together and route over to the second case. I wanted to be able to create. I mean, I'm sure if you guys have been watching my channel, you've seen my little mascot. This is kind of really meaningful to me in that, you know, we only have so many hands and so many fingers, and this sort of a thing to me is kind of, I'm sort of considering this like my, giant Eurorack hybrid octopus. I didn't want to keep it in just one section. I wanted to be able to take signals out of the case and take signals into the case. What we patched up today was something really, really straightforward and really simple, but I've got a module here from Bifaco called the CV thing, which actually allows me to like patch signals and then send those out of the case into hardware gear. So I could say use the sequence 8 over here to like sequence an external synthesizer if I wanted to. I haven't, there's only so many hours in the day, but these are the reasons why I've chosen these specific modules so that I could get as many signals into the case and out of the case and route them in different ways. Over here, we've got the Strymon AA1, which allows me to take any audio and route that into the system, or any audio in the system and route that out to external effects units. I've got that Strymon here, and I've also got that Strymon here. So on each of these racks, I'm able to take that an audio signal out rather, and route that into like an external effects unit or an external filter, or like the electron heat or the big sky or whatnot. Over here on this side, I've got a mono output so that I can run any signals out of that into like a mono guitar pedal that I so choose. I really wanted to be able to, send signals in lots of different places and really not have so many limitations as to how I'm using the gear. I wanted to be able to sequence with the Digitact, but also be able to sequence using sequencers in real time. Again, I'm just going to say it again. That's why I'm loving these Mazatron Golden Shower sequencers, because they're so easy to change up in real time. You don't really know what you're going to get in real time with the Euclid sequencers as you start changing those, because they don't have the same kind of a visual readout that you can see on these Mazatron Golden Shower modules. I think we're probably going to call it right there. It's been almost an hour and a half today, and we talked about the drum and bass patch and how I put that together. We had a few hiccups, but we eventually overcame those and got the Digitact talking to the rest of the system and sequencing gear. All my sequencers are in use. We created a fun little groove, being as though the Pioneer RMX 1000 is in. You could already start using this. We could be adding some elements to the frequencies. We could do the cool roll effect. We can bring, the noise effect up. Start with that ebb and flow of our jam. We can be turning things off and on in real time. Now is where the jamming comes in, and the learning how to work with the different elements comes in. Learning like how you can change the sequencers in real time, maybe how you might filter a certain sound down in real time. I hope you guys have found this useful. And we are definitely going to be doing more really casual hangouts like this. So feel free to bring questions to any future of these Eurorack live streams. Maybe on Fridays or on the weekends, I can get some sort of a schedule going. That's sort of a goal, so we'll see what happens there. I'm going to go ahead and bid you adieu and say thank you very much for watching. Have a great day, everyone.